And we're live. Here we go.
Woo!
Welcome to the Literacy View. Well, we have a breaking news episode today. We are going to be discussing Sold a Story, episode 11, The Outlier, and it came out February 20th. So very recent. Hopefully, wait a minute. Are we live?
We're live, Faith. Faith, we have 20 people on so far.
Oh,
Everybody's
good. For a minute, something popped up. Sorry.
You know, it's funny. Sometimes Faith and I don't even know how we became podcasters. It's a miracle. We do everything by ourselves. No publishing companies, no editors, no secretaries that help us schedule this stuff. Every day we wake up in the morning and say, how did we do this? And we're very thankful for all of you. Appreciating that this low budget podcast.
I have my mug too. My Literacy View mug.
Wait, so let's do a cheers to the people that are joining us today, Faith.
Yes, cheers to everyone joining us.
Also, let me show everybody. I'm wearing my Literacy View merch. I'm getting ready for the 3 conferences that Faith and I are going to. I was wearing my merch today at the gym.
Let me read it to everyone. So, topics, not people; pedagogy, not programs; research and evidence, not opinions. So you too can get one of these cool shirts, sweatshirts.
Look at mine's a hoodie.
A hoodie. So if you go to our store on our website, theliteracyview.com, you will see a link. And we have a lot of great stuff. So hope you join us. All right. We're getting
One more thing. If you love what we're doing, can you please, and I know it's difficult to figure it out, go on Apple Podcasts and write us a great review. We'd really appreciate it. That's how we'll move the work forward and share what we're doing with more people. So if you can go on Apple Podcasts and write us a great 5-star review, we would really, truly, from the bottom of our hearts, appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. So we're getting started with Sold a Story. Hopefully we're all set to go.
Oh, remind people, Faith, that this is an interactive session. So I will be monitoring the chat in multiple locations. So if you have comments, feedback, thoughts, opinions, don't like something we're saying, disagree with us, agree with us, this is your chance to be interactive. So let's have a great time together. Let's get this party started.
All right, here we go. So for those of you who want a little bit of a recap, so episode 11 focused on an outlier district, Steubenville, Ohio. It's in Eastern Ohio. And apparently everybody by the 3rd grade is able to read. So it's quite amazing, quite a feat. Congratulations, Steubenville. Obviously, you're doing something right. We're talking about the podcast now. What information surfaced from it, what we feel is important, what we feel might be a little bit questionable, but we're going to get started. So, like I said, it seems as though everyone, and this is a low-income district, so that's really the special point here. Low-income area, and usually low income, unfortunately, yields low reading scores. You know, there's often a correlation. But here, they beat the odds where it's a low income area and all the children are reading. By the time they're in 3rd grade, by the time they're in 5th grade, they showed that these kids were reading quite well, at least on grade level or above. So here's my first question, Judy. You know, when it started, you and I were talking and we said it seemed like a slow start, right? You mentioned this to me, that it seemed like it took a while before
Faith, you're mentioning my deep, dark, dirty secrets.
Well, I mean, we're sharing right now. And it seemed like they were talking mostly about, there was a little girl. She went to school. She didn't have her hair brushed. and there was a teacher there brushing her hair and doing her hair. And the whole idea of this was they need to get their basic needs met in order to be ready for school. Judy, you're in a low-income school district, right?
Actually, Faith, that's very funny. That's so true. This reminded me a lot of where I work every day. I work in one of the poorest districts in New York City, in the Bronx, in the South Bronx. I work for District 9 in the Bronx, and we have a high population of homeless students, shelter students, low-income students, transitional housing students, immigrant students, migrant students, and so forth. Yeah.
Right. So some of these things that were mentioned, like making sure basic needs are being met, I mean, that happens in a lot of schools. Is that, obviously that's so important, but they spent a lot of time on this. Does your school do things like this? You told me you're in a community school.
So I will be honest, I've never brushed anybody's hair. I'm lucky if I brush my own hair. I just did brush my hair for the show. So I definitely don't do that. And I'm a boy mom, so I'm not really good at styling hair. But in terms of taking care of kids' needs, we definitely do that. We have a lot of programs in my school that I'm really proud of, and I hope my principal's watching tonight. We have financial literacy programs. We have programs to make sure that kids get outside more often, where we have a program called Street Lab, so that, even if our playgrounds isn't functioning well, or, if there's construction in the building, that we make sure that our kids get fresh air. We have shows in our building. We actually have a medical facility in my building. One day I wasn't feeling well and I went downstairs, and that's where I discovered a whole clinic that was related to the hospital. I thought that was phenomenal. So like if kids need, their vaccines, or they're not feeling well, there's a dentist down there and so forth.
It's important. Yeah. Clearly it's important. Yeah. It's important. But, I know a lot of school districts. As you know, I was a regional Reading First coach, and that was mentioned at the very end of this episode, that Reading First, definitely was an influence here, because at the time, they're using a program that wasn't mentioned in this episode, but if you look it up, it's Success for All. And that came out of the work of Reading First, as far as having certain programs that school districts would have to use. And they're meant for districts that, the Reading First grant was meant for school districts that were low performing, often low income, high number of kids where English is not the first language. So, Reading First had a huge impact. So I went in as a regional coach to a lot of these school districts, and I saw many dedicated teachers that were trying to meet basic needs all the time. So I don't know if that was a very different factor in terms of what was being done here. But they did say, Emily Hanford did say, they do a bunch of stuff that a lot of other schools don't. And I think that's what we want to really look at. Like, what's something that would happen in other schools? Like, you're in a community school, these things happen. But what is it about Steubenville that's so different here? I could tell you, in looking at this, one thing I noticed is they were not swayed by the next shiny penny. They weren't looking for the magic bullet, because they stayed with a program. And for those of you who are not aware of it, it is Success for All, for 25 years. And so,
can I ask you something? Do you know anything about that program? I've been in education for over 28 years. I've never come across that program. I will be honest with you.
Well, it's a program that on Long Island wasn't chosen. So I don't have direct experience. So when I was with Reading First, I went into probably 7 school districts that were, low performing, lots of, low income kids. And there wasn't one school district there that picked Success for All. However, we knew about it. It was one of the programs that were, highly regarded. And so basically Success for All, just what you saw, there's that cooperative learning, there's a strong phonics component, K-2. It's a program that definitely incorporates a lot of practice. And on this show, we talk about how practice, thank you, honey, is not a thing, that they're always so busy learning so many different things. We're always trying to cram so much in, and they're not really reading enough. And you've said this a number of times, Judy, that you even thought from your balanced literacy days that kids read a lot more.
Something we've spoken about on the Literacy View, and something that I've been pretty passionate about. I think I even had that quote that I made like maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's hanging in my building. One of the things I've always said is, in real estate, it's location, location, location. However, in reading, it's application, application, application. So it felt validating to hear that's what we all should be doing. And I think that a lot of schools aren't moving at the speed that they want is because they're not prioritizing the application piece. Kids will not become better readers unless they have a chance to practice learning those skills that the teacher's showing them in their explicit instruction. Because, learning how to read, especially for, beginning readers, there's a physical element to it. Moving your finger, moving your eyes, being able to slide through the words, being able to scoop or sound phrased and fluent. And a lot of that interactive piece has to happen with feedback in order for kids to become successful.
Yeah, so here's something that I think is so interesting. And I want to bring this up because it wasn't really talked about. When I was looking at the chats, it said that the program that Steubenville uses, Success for All, was under threat. All right. And why? Because it was not on the list of the approved programs in Ohio. Now, I have to call BS, because Ohio, what the heck is wrong with you? For years you have a place with high performance in a low-income area. Do not even think that this is important to put on an approved list.
Faith, your volume is kind of poor. I don't hear you right now.
I said, do you hear me now?
Yeah, I do. You know what's funny, Faith? The chat, for some reason, is not showing up on your high five. Can you see? Because I think your viewers on high five. Can you see to make sure that? Oh, I see. It's on your high five LinkedIn page. Okay. I'll see if I can add. I could see if I could add it to your other page as well. Hold on.
Yeah. So
okay.
I don't know if people really caught that, but that to me is just absolutely stunning. And that just shows how, people are all in these things for themselves. They are so into what they want. They all have to have an agenda.
I don't know, Faith, I don't know if I agree with you.
So why wouldn't it be on the list?
I think, Faith, I got to challenge you on that one. I think that the problem was that people rushed to make the lists and that they didn't think everything through. And I think communication must have been very poor. And I think for a very long time in education, people don't know good things that are happening enough. Like there's schools
that probably think the Ohio State Department of Education
should have
business. Come on, give me a break. I'm sorry, give me a break.
But you know what? But maybe too many people in this country got involved with that whole thing of what's getting on that approved list. I mean, look at New York City itself. Were the highest rated evidence-based programs chosen? I'm not so sure, Faith. We know that.
No, this is what I'm trying. Okay, so I'm not saying it's just in Ohio. I am saying that there is a real problem here when we don't take a look at school districts that get it right, and then they don't even put a program on an approved list. Now, I have my feelings about approved lists as well. I don't think there should be a list of approved programs, because if you're really following evidence-based practices, it's not so much about the program. Why don't we look at what the program has, the components, so that this way we know what to look for no matter what program we use. So I think that's a ridiculous point as well. But that really got to me, because I kept thinking to myself, wait a minute, what the heck is going on here? This district was written up, in a book. It was all over. I'm sure that people had to know in the Ohio State Department of Ed, they have all the records, they have data, right? They were testing. NAEP wasn't, taken away then like it is now. That's another story. But I mean, come on, people had to know. So I think they're, right there, big red flags for me. All right. What are you thinking when you heard this podcast, Judy? Because I could keep going on and on, but what are you thinking?
There were a lot of things that I heard that resonated with me. I kept thinking, like, initially it felt like sold a story. I was wondering, like, who the audience was. Initially, it felt like the audience was definitely for parents to become informed. And this seemed like it was definitely for parents, but also for educators. A lot of it wasn't new for me as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, but I think it was very helpful information, almost like validating for me that we're on the right path. I think some of the key things that stood out for me is attendance is very important.
All right, let's stay with the attendance.
Let's
So
do that.
for those of you listening, obviously we all know kids have to be in school to be able to learn, but this district did something to get kids to actually show up to school, right? There were incentives, and it wasn't incentives for the parents to get the kids to school. The incentives were for the children to be responsible for themselves so that they want to show up. So that I thought was great, just absolutely fantastic. So yeah, so they definitely mentioned attendance. What about pre-K?
I thought the pre-K thing was spot on. I thought, and it's funny, Faith and I have been talking about that for a while behind the scenes. We know how important pre-K is. We are in the trenches, and we see a lot of wasted time in pre-K programs. A lot of good things are happening: nap time, playtime, creative time. But I don't see enough of the foundational skills being prioritized in pre-K, and I think that that's a missed opportunity, especially that now a lot of pre-K programs are all-day programs. There's no reason that we can't be working with our kids on the sounds. The kids are ready. A lot of them are ready and want to be exposed.
What
and
about
it can be done.
language?
And that was the big one, that oral language piece. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me on the episode, was that oral language piece, whether it be in pre-K or in the upper grades. Like, even in the upper grades, I see people very often will let kids respond in phrases. No, we have to work on making kids articulate full, complete sentences and have those expressive be able to communicate effectively. And it does start in pre-K. Those oral language experiences are key and vital. And I think that the model that Steubenville has fosters that. They make it easy for that to happen with that cooperative piece. I know that, not all schools call that a cooperative piece. Sometimes other schools will call it partnerships, partner reading, buddy experiences. I don't know what other schools are calling it, but that's a very, very important piece of it, where kids get to talk to each other and actually even listen to each other talk, listen to each other read, partner read. And what I thought was cool in the episode was when a kid was able to give another student effective feedback, where they mentioned that robot reading. Yes. And that means that the instruction, that explicit instruction, is probably solid in that classroom, because that's probably language that the teacher's using that now the kids are using even with each other. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yes. And the child who received it was very receptive, just like kind of moved on, wasn't hurt by, being told he needs to be fluent, and he did it again. And the little girl was like, oh, good, and that's fantastic, so that cooperative learning piece also encourages social emotional skills, to be able to wait your turn, to listen, wait for someone else to talk, not always like me. It's a very, very good skill to learn early on. And the pre-K is right in the building. So that's very good. I think you have a pre-K right in your building as well. Not
we actually have pre-K in my building, and we have 3K. It's unbelievable that these kids are so well taken care of in my building. But would I like to see more foundational skills? Absolutely. And that's a conversation I'm definitely going to have, in my own building, recommending, they could do phonics programs in pre-K. They could do, like, a lot of people are like, oh, it's going to take away from the joy in playing, but there's plenty of time to do both. And, there's no research that says that learning phonics or learning your sounds can't be fun. It is. I think it could be fun.
I think they said it formally started in kindergarten. So I'm not quite sure how much they did in the pre-K. They stressed the oral language piece. But I could tell you this, Judy, as far as the sounds, they had a mnemonic alphabet, which means an embedded picture alphabet. And that's something that we did in Lynbrook too. Besides the sounds first type of instruction, also, it wasn't just regular, an alphabet chart. We got the embedded alphabet with the picture mnemonics, so that the letter M lowercase looks like mountains, like it's embedded right in the letter. All these types of things that help to kind of recognize a letter is important. And they just refer to that letter by a basic sound that would be in the initial code teaching. So once they get into more complicated stuff, then obviously letter names are being used, but not at the very start.
That makes sense. But I definitely think, based on what I'm seeing in the trenches, we waste a lot of time. A lot of phonics programs, and I'm not going to name any because I'm not about programs, I'm about pedagogy, but some programs take a very long time to get through, learning all the sounds. And sometimes kids start blending only in the middle of kindergarten, and because they're spending so much time learning the sounds. I'm wondering if we start some of that work in pre-K, even if it's just exposure, can that help our kids, especially our struggling learners, for who it sometimes takes a little bit longer for it to become permanent?
Right. And especially if it's not in the home, and again, we can't assume, because there are plenty of homes, even if it's low income, where it's being done. But just generally speaking, that you're right, English is a very complex language. And to start some of these things earlier, and people might shun that and say, oh, you're taking away the joy of learning and playing. That should be all play. But you know what? That's said from a very privileged point of view, isn't it? Like, what we might provide naturally with having, these opportunities, many of these kids don't have those home opportunities. So to give it to them in school earlier on is important. I agree with that. Let's talk about
the Faith, let me just chime in for 1 second. I just want everybody to start also posting comments. I'm going to be looking at the chat. The chat is now open. So the chat is open on Faith's High Five Literacy page. If you post on our Facebook page, I'll look there occasionally as well. If you want to post on our YouTube page, that's great. If you want to post anywhere, in the messenger, anywhere you want to post, the chat is open and I will be monitoring that. So if I'm looking down, I'm occasionally looking at the chat. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your thoughts. A lot of people got emotional, especially about what Faith's about to talk about. So here she goes.
All right. So
There's-
the whole letter names issue, right? So I have to say, this was said, and they did not say they used the speech to print approach. And I want to be clear that just because they're starting with sounds doesn't mean it's a speech to print approach. So they were using, it looked like,
wait, I want to clarify that. And see, these are the technical things that sometimes in reporting, it's great to get clarification from somebody like Faith, who's actually doing the work and actually worked a lot with speech to print. I have not had a lot of speech to print. I've done a lot of work with, sounds first, but I have not. So let's hear what Faith has to say on this. Thanks for clarifying this.
So what they were doing was they were using almost like a sound drill, right? But instead of doing something like a apple, it was just they see the letter in the embedded alphabet and they would just say just the sound. But with speech to print, you start with oral language, you start with a word, and then you start segmenting that word into sounds and then applying letters to go with it without going into letter names. So there's an element of this. And this is what I mean. Everybody's so into their own agenda. And, they want to be able to claim, oh, well, this is, this and this is this. Yeah, that is a big thing. And I did mention that I wrote about this as far as, a cultural shift that needs to happen sometimes when you focus on sounds rather than letter names. But it doesn't mean the whole approach was adopted. That's what I wanted to bring up.
Can you also remind people why starting with sounds versus letters might be really a good strategic move for those people in the field? I know, but I would like for you to, touch base on that with our listeners today.
Yeah, so sure. So, there's something called cognitive load theory. Many of the people watching already know what that means. But what it means is we don't want to overload a kid with too much information when they're first trying to learn something. They can't handle it. They can't juggle it all. So you want to use just the essential information. So in getting back to that example, some kids can handle it and separate it from a apple, and they'll just know, they'll see the letter and say, But I've had students where I was doing the whole sound drill with the letter name, the keyword, the sound. And then I would ask the kid, what's the sound? And they would say, a apple, And I'm like, no, just the sound. They could not separate it. And it happened on more than one occasion, trust me, many times. And it's that they ended up doing this almost like a song and not really being able to make that association immediately with seeing the letter and then just knowing the sound. And so one thing about what these teachers were doing, that's what we need to look at, not the program so much, not the whole approach, but what are the elements here that really seem to make a difference?
And if I could just chime in, and the other reason that, being able to prioritize the sounds is really important, because when you're reading, right, you see a letter A, what do you have to do? It's more important that you know what sound to make when you see the letter, because that's going to help you become a good reader, rather than knowing, okay, A is the letter A. No, you need to know that when you see a CVC word and you see the letter A, you're making the sound. Or if you're seeing a CAT, you're saying at, not CAT. It's more important to be able to read the word by saying at. Really Correct. Key point. I have a new point that I want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear from you.
Okay.
This was my main takeaway from the whole episode. Okay, this was my big one. What I thought was pretty brilliant, but I definitely have some nuances that I want to dig into also, was how they grouped kids by skills based on just, grade level. It was based on skills, and they were able to move kids up and down. Now, I had some feelings about, calling it, oh, they moved them to the first grade. I don't know if I would move them to quote unquote the first grade. I think I would just call them skills, because we have to be social emotionally aware of how kids are feeling, and it might not feel great for a fifth grader. And I don't think the episode covered that, like to be in fifth grade and say, oh, you're going to the first grade room. So I think we have to be mindful of that. But I think the main point of grouping kids by skills to accelerate them is brilliant. I've seen a lot of programs not accelerate at the pace that they should, including my own, because a lot of top kids are not getting enough enrichment, because there's so many kids that are struggling in the class, which means very often we have to reteach to fill those gaps. And I think that whether you do a school-wide skills-based approach where you're moving kids into different classes regardless of their grade, or if you want to start slow and do it on your grade where you move kids around, don't be afraid, leaders. Don't be afraid that it's going to take up instructional time, that it's going to be too chaotic. If you put those systems and structures in place and are fearless, very good things might happen. I'm curious to hear what Faith has to say, and then I'm going to start reading the comments that are coming in the chat, which I'm really excited that the comments in the chat are coming in.
All right. So love what you said. I agree with you 100%. I think that was a really important point, that they obviously knew the data. There was an instructional coach. I think her name was Jennifer Blackburn. And, she mentioned that they really look at the data, and the data gives them this, really fine-grained type of information, and they use it, not just doing data for data's sake, just testing kids, which happens in a lot of places where there's a lot of assessing going on, but they're not using that information wisely, right? But I could say here, not only did they look at it, they knew the skills needed. They were able to move kids up into higher groups, down into lower groups. And I do agree with you. Rather than saying moving them down to a first grade classroom could be emotionally jarring for a kid, I would hope that somehow they would look at that and say, okay, we should do like a walk to our group. And wherever the group is, it doesn't have to be.
You can even call it skills-based group. You could call it the CVC, the group that's working on skills, CVC group, or, get creative, get fun. Oh, by the way, we have some interesting points coming in. Faith, can I read some of the points that are coming in?
Sure.
All right. So Emily Smith, hi, Emily. Thanks for chiming in. Emily said, I love the point you made earlier about identifying the things that make a program successful versus relying completely on that program because it saw success. She continued to say, it baffles me when I have to convince great teachers to trust themselves more than they trust a program. That is so true.
Oh my, I love that. You know what, Judy? Cheers. That is cheers.
No, it's not a cheers for me.
No, I know. It's for Emily Smith.
And then we have Ed Jones. Hey, Ed, what's up? Ed said, have you guys shared flowcharts of what to do based on the data? Stephanie Stoller has done this, but I don't see a lot.
So I'm assuming flowcharts as far as who goes where. Like if you're able to do X, Y, Z, you're moving down here. If you can't do this, back to here. So Ed, we did that in Reading First. All right. And so Reading First gets knocked all the time. It drives me crazy. But all these things that we're talking about now, so much of this came from the good work in Reading First. So I don't know, Ed, if there was a flow chart being used, because I heard what you heard, but I have seen and have used flow charts where if kids are able to do certain things, they go here. If they don't, they go a different way.
I think Ed is on the money though. And I
Yes,
think that,
so do I.
so I'm going to give Ed a cheers. This is to you.
Absolutely.
You know why?
Cheers,
Because
Ed.
I think that, Stephanie has done great work. I definitely want to see, she just came out with a new book, and maybe we'll invite her on also, especially because mid-year data is pouring in. So we'll definitely get some people to talk about MOI mid-year data. But I think that's the problem. Schools very often are struggling with their MTSS systems. Some people call it RTI, MTSS structures. It's a disaster in so many schools. And you know what? Even me, I've been doing this a long time. I don't have the perfect solution. And Ed is right. I would love a flow chart that would give me explicit directions on what I'm doing, how long my, intervention cycles might be, how to keep kids moving, because I think that we lose so much time. We get such an abundance of data, right? Whether it be our screener data, whether it be assessment data, whether it be, diagnostic data, maybe people are using Acadians, iReady, MAP, NWEA, whatever it is. But very often those systems and structures of what happens after are very frustrating to us in the field. And I feel the more time we lose, the more kids lose out, because look at it now, right? I'm going back to work tomorrow. I've been on break. It's February 23rd. We only have a couple of months left to make sure that kids are coming out readers. Now, I'm sure a lot of people watching today, maybe your data has grown more than last year. Mine has, but we still have kids that are struggling. And the sad reality is that, we still have some kids in my own building that are in red. I'm not embarrassed to say it. Now, some of those kids, remember, if a kid's in red, that doesn't mean all reds are created equally. Some kids that are in red can actually read. So you have to look a little bit deeper. When you're looking at your screener data, don't look at it like red is bad, yellow is a little bit better, green is you're okay, and blue. No, you have to really look at the nuances of what's going on with that data.
100%. And you know what? Talking about that, I've seen kids, because they read quickly, and when I mean quickly, they were just rushing right through it. They were able to benchmark, even though they had tons of errors. They were not accurate. And so it was an accuracy problem, but they just rushed right through it. And they were able to actually do well enough to be bumped into a category. And if you just look at that number and you're not really looking deeply enough, you can get fooled. So I agree with you. So here's something
Faith. Somebody just gave you cheers and you don't even want to acknowledge it. We have Julie Stevenson, who's like cheering you on. Thank you. She said, but first we have to decide, which I think the school in Ohio has done, which skills are essential, the focus. Programs have way too many to teach. Standards have way too many to teach. And then Julie continues to say, yes, Faith, whatever you were just saying, Julie's cheering you on. Any comments, Faith?
I do, Julie. Here's something. Apparently, what this Success for All has is the essentials. So you mentioned essential, right? What I'm seeing with the programs, that a lot of these programs that are being pushed now, anyhow, you know what? They're too much. They're bloated. And here's something where obviously they're doing it right, and maybe they don't have all this excess stuff, right? They have what's needed at the right time, not overloading kindergarten and first with things that they don't need at that very moment. And then probably it switches, because it even said in third grade they were reading books on rainforests. And then you heard the way that kid in fifth grade was reading. So they're doing something right. They're looking at what's important. So thank you, Julie. I do appreciate that.
And you also mentioned the very often forgotten pillar, and it's a pillar that we love on the Literacy View, fluency. Please pay attention to fluency instruction. It's not just about decoding. It's being able to make sure that the prosody, the accuracy, the voice sounds good, that kids are able to scoop in phrases rather than read word by word. So thank you for that as well. Faith, you know what's interesting?
Can I just say something? And as far as fluency goes, that's the practice piece, Judy. right? Because of the cooperative learning plan, they were getting in all this practice. And they have tutoring in-house. So that's another thing.
Wait a minute. That was one of the biggest ones. Let's not just skip over that one. Let's dig deep into that one. Go into that one.
Tutoring, using high school students, using college students, using volunteers. Now, I know that there are school districts where sometimes this is not allowed. Certain things are not allowed, but obviously they're doing it. And so I even saw, I heard, I think that they could have 25 to 40 minutes 4 times a week, twice a day sometimes, of tutoring. That's incredible during the school day. Instead of being tutored after school when they're exhausted, they're getting it during the day.
It left me wondering, though, what exactly, and I know Emily just started the series, so we have to give her time to flesh it out. She's probably listening to the Literacy View. I think some of our ideas are probably things that she thinks about as well. What does that literacy block look like at Steubenville, right? The interesting thing at Steubenville also is they did not mention their knowledge building curriculum. So I would definitely want to know what's going on with that.
So let's stop there.
One more thing. Knowledge building. I don't want to lose my last thought. Knowledge building, tutoring. I forgot.
Okay, so it'll come to you. So let's talk about this. So the knowledge building.
My AirPod fell out. I'm gonna.
Okay. Yeah, go get your AirPod. All right. So look, let's talk about what's going on here. So when was the kid reading about rainforests? 3rd grade. Now that doesn't mean that there is an informational text being brought in K1 and 2. But I could tell you that it seemed like the emphasis was on getting all these kids to be able to read the words and oral language. Those 2 pieces, oral language, to read the words.
Everybody, please, all of you on this call, let's give Faith a big fat cheers.
So, and it's not that I'm against knowledge building,
but it's annoying. I know it's so annoying when people.
But how a teacher's supposed to be able to get all this in? They're not in the classroom. They don't know. Oh, you're muted, Judy. Say it again.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Listen, we had an episode on the Literacy View with Kathy Rassel from the UK, who I loved. I forgot what episode number that was, but she mentioned that in the UK, they focus on all the standards, but they just use read alouds. They don't have any fancy schmancy knowledge building program. And guess what? They're getting great results in conjunction with their phonics programs. They don't have this big giant thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. And I think that you can get so much by having classroom sets of books, real books, and that they could read once they're able to read, making sure every kid is able to read, and working on complete sentences, syntax, grammar, and you get that. Writing. They emphasize lots and lots of writing.
And I want to chime in. I'm getting a little hyper. It's amazing that I'm getting so hyper at night. I'm a morning person.
You? Hyper?
A little bit. And then we have more comments in the chat. But I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea and think that we're against implementing a quality program. If that's the direction your school wants to go, and that's great, but make sure that it has evidence. Make sure that you realize that there's no such a thing as a perfect program. Make sure that you realize you still have to think, because some of these programs haven't been field tested for 30 years. They don't have that much evidence.
But success for all does have the research. This is what's so stunning about this. How this did not make the list, and research on the program itself. How crazy is that?
But this is the one thing I don't want to happen. And I told you this after the podcast came on. I think that we're still in a culture of idolization I don't want anybody to idolize me on this podcast because I'm just a regular person trying to make it through the day. I have good days. I have bad days. I have days that I just want to lay in bed and cry. I have, every day is a little different. I have days when Faith is texting me, did you do this? Did you do that? We're preparing for the conferences, right? But the point is, I don't think that everybody should just now think, okay, I have to copy and do exactly what they're doing. I think that this school in Steubenville probably has a lot of success. Yes, the program may have helped, but you have to realize there were so many other factors that helped: the attendance, the partner reading, the attention to application and practice. So that doesn't mean that everybody nationwide has to now jump ship, drop the program or what they're doing and switch gears. You might want to, but that doesn't mean everybody should do it. Many of the things that you're doing might be in the early stages. You might not have everybody reading yet because change also takes time, right?
Yeah. So let me tell you another thing that I noticed here. All the teachers in the building, the gym teacher, the art teacher, the music teacher, they all are responsible to work with kids on reading. Can I tell you, that's a reading first thing. So again, this goes back 25 years ago. They emphasize, I remember, I think it was even Reed Lyon saying, every teacher is a reading teacher. High school teachers, middle school teachers. If teachers say, I don't teach reading, I'm not a reading teacher, we're all reading teachers. And once
you know what we call Faith, you know what we call
that?
You know what we call that? All hands on deck. And I've been saying it and saying it and saying it. And the other key thing that they hit upon is they're all doing their literacy block at the same time, building wide. So it's all hands on deck. All manpower is being utilized at the same time. So like the gym teachers, the science teachers, because I don't see that in a lot of schools. A lot of schools, there's literacy in the morning, there's literacy in the afternoon. Third graders doing it at this time, fourth graders. No, that's not so easy. That's right. I mean, there's going to be logistical problems no matter what. But that was another key piece. Faith, we have a lot of chats. Can I read some? Or you want to read some?
Yeah, I'm noticing. Okay, well, let me see. Going back here, let's see. Julie said, we should build knowledge through oral language until you can lift the words off the page. We must slow down and make sure students can read. Take the time to segment and blend. I couldn't agree with that anymore, really. Just, yes.
Shout out also to Todd. Wonderful so far, on point. Yes, Faith, what's needed? Yes, fluency. And then Faith, read the one from Tiffany. That's the next one.
I don't see Tiffany's. I see Emily Smith. Maybe here's Emily's. It says, what are your thoughts on mixing and matching evidence-based programs to ensure all elements of the reading rope are taught? So that's a great question. So it goes back to the F-bomb, Judy. What's the F-bomb?
Oh, yeah. Yes, we started that F-bomb. We have t-shirts in our merch store. We will be wearing them at our conferences. Fidelity is the new F-bomb.
Yes, fidelity is the new F-bomb. So the issue is, do we stick with something and make sure every little piece of it is done? Or is it about the integrity of the program, making sure that the essentials are there and maybe weaving in what teachers should be doing is really looking at each kid and giving them more or less and looking at what they need. So in my opinion is we should not have to be married to something. At the beginning, when you're first learning a program, I feel it's really important because you can't learn something if you're jumping all around. But once you really learn it and know it, that's when the teacher needs to come in and you really have to start thinking, maybe this doesn't work so well. Maybe we need to add or take away or do different things.
I just wanted to make a comment on that. I think that mix and match is actually okay for knowledge building and phonics programs. Like we had an episode with Holly Lane where she said, I want to stick in my lane. We know UFLI did a great job with our phonics portion. So we hope and encourage you guys to use that. And then I said, well, since you guys did such a great job with that component, would you guys consider making a knowledge building portion? She said, no, we know what we're good at. You guys can, look for what's the top, program you could find for knowledge building. So I'm okay with, if that's what you need to do to make your school most successful, you found the phonics program you like, that's really solid and evidence-based, and you want to choose a different program like maybe core knowledge, which gets really high ratings, but was not on the selection list in New York City, right? Which is interesting. Although, Faith, I've been asking teachers how they felt about it. Many teachers did feel, and I've never taught with core knowledge, but I know that it has a lot of evidence, more than a lot of other programs, but it wasn't on the approved list in New York City. I heard for various reasons. Some people said it wasn't culturally responsive enough. Some people feel like some of these programs were created a long time ago and that they may need a little bit of an update, not in terms of the pedagogy, but in terms of like topics that are being covered and so forth, so that they could be more relatable to kids now. So that might be something to think about. Just because publishers created something that's great and evidence-based, you might want to still update your stuff. And I've said that even to, publishers of screeners. Some of these passages are like 30 years old. You might want to update your passages because things that were really relevant to kids' lives a long time ago might not even in the slightest make sense to them now. And yes, if you could read anything, but it helps if it's something that is familiar to kids as well. So Faith, I want to just read one comment. We have Tiffany. Hi, Tiffany. She said, I would love to know if the special education learning disabled students are included in the Ohio scores. Do you know, Faith?
Something, I'm not quite sure about a lot of the things in Ohio. Ed Jones said, remember, Ohio State is the home of Fontes and Pinnell. And Ed, I want to tell you, this is one of my BS moments of the podcast.
I knew it's coming. I knew it's coming.
Oh, don't get me started.
Wait. I'm going to put myself on mute. This is Faith's moment to shine. This is what really bothered her about this episode.
It's really bothering me because, they, at the very end or near the end, Emily Hanford was talking to teachers. I think they were in the middle school. So I'm going to try to kind of give that a pass. But it said that they didn't know what balanced literacy was. They didn't know Fontes and Pinnell. Now, how is that possible? How is this possible when, Ohio State is the home of Literacy Collaborative, where that's where all of this guided reading stuff came from. This is where they get trained in it in Ohio State. So to not even know what balanced literacy is, or Fontes and Pinnell, or Calkins, that blew my mind. So, I understand that, okay, what you're doing is working, and you've been doing this in your school district for 25 years, so maybe you wouldn't have direct experience. But how in the world do you not know these players? Unless they're just teachers and administrators in the upper grades, and they just never had a need to know. But that to me seemed like BS. I mean, I think Emily.
Right, so this is that way. I know. I was going to tell you.
200 teachers until she found the few who didn't know, and that's who she put on the podcast. That's what I'm thinking. How is that possible? What do you think, Judy?
Yeah, I also was like, what? They sounded like they were like, they were like, what? Balanced literacy? Meanwhile, I was trained from Ohio State for reading recovery. I mean, and everybody in Ohio had to hear about it. I mean, there's no way that people that are passionate about literacy are like in so much of a bubble. I don't know if I was buying that moment too. I know what Faith was saying. So Faith was texting me behind the scenes on that one because, we're emotional people and passionate people, as you know. And she was like, Yeah, I don't know about that one. She must have asked a lot of people and then just found a couple that didn't know. But yeah, that Faith did not find that moment to be believable. By the way, Leslie's on here. Let's give a shout out to our good friend Leslie
Hi,
Lloyd.
Leslie.
Think SRSD. She said, if they all teach reading, then in every class they can bring it in and reinforce that instruction. So she's encouraging what we all know is best practice, whether it be in your science room, whether it be in your social studies room, whether it be in your gym class. Don't miss those opportunities to bring in literacy. But you know what, Faith, I have to say, I think not enough people hold at a classroom people responsible for that in some buildings. There's like almost like a lower standard sometimes, I think, for out of classroom people in terms of what the expectation is. And I think that Leslie is right. You know, kids could be learning short responses even in their social studies class and how to respond. And I don't know if that's happening. Sometimes I see, you know, in places that I visit that, you know, teachers are lecturing, but are they also following the science of reading? Are they as informed as the gen ed classroom on what best practices are? What do you think, Faith?
You know what? It's very hard to say. We're only going by a half-hour podcast, you know, and I don't want to make generalizations.
And she just started. She's
Right.
probably going to.
We don't know what's to come. But Jeremiah, hi Jeremiah, he said, I'm amazed that this school did it for years and no one knew about it. And so, you know, I'm amazed too. I am just simply like baffled by the whole thing.
But we have to give Emily credit. She brought it to the forefront again, right? She brought it to the forefront. And I think that that's what more schools have to do and more districts have to do. Like, don't let me find out that something great's happening on LinkedIn. Don't let me find out that you're presenting on something great that's happening in your district and we don't know about it in the trenches. We have to start having people know the good things that are happening, not just because of Emily, but we're all working in school and districts. Bring us there. Show us what's happening. That's great. Bring us those pockets of success. Don't just tell us, bring us there. Show us, you know, let us go there as an intervisitation. It's just, I feel like so many good things are happening, but we're not making it a priority to like make it happen in more places.
But again, you know what? You're being fed what people want you to hear. And so what I'm saying is the same way I said, you know, before, it's amazing how the message gets filtered through different people, through special interest groups, through people who want you to believe a certain way. And so, like you said, New York City had 3 programs to choose from. You know what? These programs didn't necessarily have a strong evidence base. Maybe the components of the program did, right? That there were research-based practices, but the whole program didn't have as much as something like Success for All.
So I think it goes back to what Nate Joseph was saying, and he said it early on the Literacy View many episodes ago. He was almost skeptical of actual program names being written on documents. He was saying that maybe that we should have written things that should not be happening in classrooms, not even things that should be happening, but I think he said put down a clear list of the things that we don't want to see happening in the classrooms.
Right. And I agree with that. So like if there's something that could hurt kids, then put that on a list. But you know something, to have a list of these approved programs, we know that there are going to be really good programs left off. And then you're going to have other programs that could be on, and we don't know why they're necessarily on. Sometimes we can't even figure out why that program is on.
Do you think that it would have been better, Faith, if they would have done a suggested list? Because maybe some schools would be curious to see suggestions instead of mandates.
Well, you know what? I think we have a history in this country of everything is punitive, right? So it's like, no, you can't do this. Like you get punished for doing this. I mean, that was the problem with No Child Left Behind, right? So it was like all these schools were getting on the bad list. And, you know, that's a problem. It's emotionally jarring for the teacher. Doesn't boost morale. We have to find better ways to help people rather than putting them down and putting the schools down.
Well, I think that's what happens in education. I think very often we're very tough on teachers. Teachers are always given, feedback and rated as you're effective, you're highly effective, you're ineffective, you're developing. And, we don't want to label kids, but we label teachers. I think we have to be more supportive of our teachers. There was a learning curve. Change takes time. But I think that, overall, we have to have systems and structures in place for success. Faith, I think we're at the hour mark, so maybe we could recap our top takeaways and then we could wrap it up. And one last thing from Ed, he said, would sure be interesting to know where they recruit from at Steubenville. How do they recruit teachers?
Well, I think they train. They do a lot of professional development. So I don't know if it's that they're picking teachers because they went to a certain school. From what I gathered, Ed, they have a very strong professional development component. And I think Success for All emphasizes professional development. And so everybody gets on the same page. Everybody knows what
Faith, is Success for All just a phonics program and foundation program?
No, it's not. No, it's not just, but it's like you see that in the early grades, at least.
So it's one-stop shopping. It has everything in it. I don't know.
Well, I think they have certain books, sets of books that they read from. So again, I haven't used it, but I do think that it has, trade books included.
We have Faith, one viewer that just chimed in on the messenger. She said she has some information on Steubenville. It's Katie. She said, so Steubenville has 2 elementary schools, 2 academy schools. One is a STEM academy, one is a middle school, and then 1 high school. She wanted to share that info too.
But does she know about the, like Ed asked, which schools these teachers attended?
No.
Okay. No. So I don't know about that, but I think a lot of this is the professional development, that everybody's on the same page. And like they said, any teacher could walk in at any moment and know exactly where these kids are. So
takeaway. What I gathered also from this episode that I think was really important is that, not everybody in the building seemed like they were an expert, but they were confident enough that they felt confident to teach kids how to read. So you don't have to feel like, oh my God, I have to be perfect to teach kids how to read. As long as you know the basic principles and continue, like Faith said, to attend professional development and so forth, I think that's also another key reason that the school succeeded. They probably weren't afraid to have school aides. Like paraprofessionals working with kids, or like they mentioned in the episode, high school kids. And what was really cool in the episode is they mentioned a high school kid came back and saw the same books that they were trained on as a little kid. By the way, Katie's writing something in the chat, so she probably has more
I'm glad you mentioned that, the consistency, that this young woman attended school in Steubenville, and she's like, oh, I know this. These are the same books we've had. So there's this idea that they found something that works. They're not just jumping ship because there's something else that comes around. They see success, they stick with it, they're being well trained. That's a good lesson. That if something is working, you make it work, you stay with it, you try to refine it, you work with it. And I think they're doing a very nice job there. Any last points before we wrap up?
Faith, what are your top 3 takeaways from this episode that you want teachers, educators, principals, researchers to walk away from?
I don't know. It's hard to say the top, but I do think what you said before, the skill groups, very, very important. That, every kid has to master these basic skills. And, even if they're at different levels, they're not just moving them on. They are sticking with it and making sure through tutoring, through volunteering, through the high school and college students, through everything they do, through all the teachers doing the work at, music teacher, art teacher, gym teacher, that it's all hands on deck and they're doing a really good job. So that's one. Probably the idea of making sure that all kids are in school, that they really have a great incentive to get kids to attend school, really important. And that's something that really doesn't take any training. Like, my goodness, that's something we could all explore, is to make sure these kids are going to school. And what would be my last one? The oral language piece. The oral language piece early on in pre-K and up is just critical. Those are my top ones. What about you?
So you hit all my top ones, and the last one that I want to reinforce is application, application, application. Make sure those kids practice reading. Think about it. When's the last time you heard that kid read? When's the last time you gave them feedback? Think about the books that you're giving those kids to read. Are they the right materials? If they're not the right materials, if you're still putting your early readers in level books, get them out of their hands, put them in a book that's skills-based. Skills are important, especially in the early stages of learning how to read. And the last comment from our friend Julie, I love the part where they all stated that they were sure they could teach a child to read. Be confident in what you're learning and believe that you can do it. We can all do it. And the last takeaway, yes, we heard about amazing things are happening, but probably amazing things are happening in your schools as well. So that doesn't mean you have to drop everything you're doing. You can make some changes and adjustments if you need to. But slow and steady wins the race. If you're doing good things, change takes time. Keep staying the course. But if there's something that's not working, keep your options open as well. Thank you, everybody. Oh, Wiley Blevins. Yay. My friend Wiley, who I adore and learned everything
application.
Application.
Judy, Wiley is putting it in the chat, just what you said.
Because Wiley taught me everything I know about teaching kids how to read at all the trainings that I went to. He was the one that taught me how to teach kids how to decode and to prioritize application. And also, another shout out to Wiley. I think we wait too long to teach kids. We depend on programs to teach kids, how to decode words. And his book showed me that most kids already by middle of first grade, they should know how to decode all the syllable types or how words work in terms of decoding. You don't have to wait. There's so many opportunities throughout your literacy block to show kids how words work. Kids are so much more capable than we realize if we show them. So thank you, everybody. Changing lives one view at a time. And thank you to Faith's hubby. He's such a great fan. He said, great conversation, ladies. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Love
you.
you all. Thank you. Have a great night.